One Tuesday, I was watching the evening news when I got a phone message from my wife, Anthea. "Sorry, Hugh, I'm late for work. I'll be home around 8. X. I knew it was hectic at work, and most weeks she stayed late 1 or 2 nights. However, it was the second message that bothered me. Said I was running late. Booked our usual room 207 at the Vic at 1 o'clock. I knew it was an accident and not a prank. I hurriedly went out and got in the car. The Victoria Hotel was closer to our house than Anthea's company. I got there before her. There was no need to make excuses to the girl at the front desk. The secret was to look like you had a right to be there. I nodded to her and ran up the stairs to the second floor. There were curtains at the end of the hallway. I looked out into the parking lot, and 2 minutes later Anthea's car pulled up to the hotel. I followed her into the hotel, walked over and stood in front of the elevator. It started to go up, so she didn't use the stairs. I slipped through the door to the landing. Through the window, I watched her walk up to 207. She slid her card to the reader and entered, leaving the door open. Soon the elevator beeped and a man stepped out. He looked familiar. That was all I needed. They were going to suffer. I thought I'd seen him at one of her company's receptions, and a search on their website showed he was Howard Harrison, Executive Operations Manager, the department Anthea headed. Scroll through the contacts on your phone, and Howard would probably end up next to Hugh. That's me. It would be easy to send a message to the wrong person. I don't think they talked much in their regular room, so they may never have discovered that the message hadn't arrived. The next day I called her principal early. I was lucky. He was in his office before his assistant. "It's a pleasure to catch you in person, Mr. Broughton. Please hear me out. This is not a malicious call." "Go ahead." He was intrigued. "One of your executives is having an affair with a married woman in his department. Your website says he's also married and has a son. I was wondering if you have a policy that discourages or prohibits this behavior." "May I ask who is calling?" "I am the husband of the woman in question. I'll give you my name, but first I'd like to know what position I'm in." "I see. It's policy that if a supervisor has an affair with a member of his department, it's punishable by termination." "Thank you. My name is Hugh Fletcher. The cheaters are my wife Anthea and her supervisor Howard Harrison. Would you be able to meet with them some evening?" "Sure. We could meet at the Greyhound around 6. We met, and as soon as I gave him the details, he spoke. "I'll be honest with you. I don't really like Harrison, so I'm willing to take him out. Tell me what you have in mind, provided you provide proof of the intrigue. Frankly, what you have so far is not enough." "Is that the kind of evidence that should be presented in court? Only I don't want to get involved with private investigators. I'm a bank manager and I'm careful with money, especially my own." "No, I have the option of firing one or both of them. I just need evidence that will satisfy me. Though I must say I hate to lose Anthea. She's one of our best." "How's that?" said I. "In my first week at the bank, I was given an assignment to clean out the basement." On Friday, Anthea worked late. After making sure Mr. Harrison had reserved room 207, I waited on the stairs again and went to the door before her lover arrived. After he entered, I went back to the parking lot and started fiddling with her car. I knew how she would react if the car didn't start. She'd leave it at Victoria's, not wanting to call and say she'd be more later. It all depended on her taking a cab or giving Harrison a ride. I was sure she'd choose the latter. Around 8:15, Harrison's car pulled up to the house. As she was getting out of it, I got out and spoke to him. "I need you to come over to our place for a minute." "I'm sorry, I got held up at work too. I need to get home." "I'm sorry too, but it's an emergency. It'll only take a minute." Reluctantly, he got out of the car and joined us. As we walked to the house, their words poured over each other. They explained how they both had to stay late at work, go to the hotel for a drink, find out about Anthea's car trouble, and so on. In the living room, they fell silent. Seeing their managing director on the couch, it happens. "Sit on either side of me," he instructed, "and be quiet." "I want to show you a movie," I said. "I recently transferred it to a memory card." They looked awkward as the TV turned on. "The first episode shows Anthea arriving in room 207 tonight. Then you see me at the door with a brush. I'll explain that later. Next, we see Howard arrive. And finally, we see me removing the fuse from the ignition of Anthea's car. I can explain that. Anthea said. No need, I can do that too. There's Al behind you. I'm not going to go over your contracts chapter and verse. You know I can fire you both. He looked at Anthea. Your husband has asked that Howard be demoted from executive director of operations to supervisor. He has to stay in that position for 2 years, experiencing the humiliation of having to take orders from people he used to give them to. No way, Howard predictably replied. Al smoothly continued, turning to him. You'll take a significant pay cut and lose your company car. Make up some story for your wife. I couldn't resist interrupting him. It shouldn't be hard. He's been lying to her for months. You can refuse, he continued, but it's not wise. Hugh will explain how it will affect Anthea's work. You will be promoted, I began, from department head to manager. That will give you a salary comparable to mine. You won't contest the divorce, and you'll find another place to live. You can take your car and personal effects, and we'll arrange for a few treasures we own jointly, a wedding album for starters. But no maintenance payments, and the house will go to me. Ridiculous, she shrieked. You can't do that. I must disagree with you, objected Broughton. If your husband can show me proof of your treason, and he can, I can do it. Hugh, I think the time has come for your demonstration. I have been looking forward to it. I'm ready, I said. But just to be clear, if either of you refuses these terms, Al will fire both of you, and it will be virtually impossible for you to work in your specialty again. Your termination and our divorce will be made public. The evidence will also be turned over to Howard's wife. Al turned on the video on his cell phone, and I turned off the lights. I turned back to my movie. Note my brush on the doorknob. Glue might have been fun, but I used something better. There's nothing on it, yelled Anthea. I grabbed her arm and lifted her off the couch. Al leaned forward with his phone. Everything will be revealed. It's an LED ultraviolet flashlight. I turned off the TV, plunging the room into darkness. It's called a black light these days. There was fluorescent powder on the brush. I've had it for decades, but I've made sure it still works. We used to call it detection powder. Bank bills were coated with it to identify them later. Thefts, ransomware, and so on. Today, we have more sophisticated methods. Anthea tried to pull away from me, but I gripped her hand firmly. It is pale green and not visible in the light of the corridor of the Victoria Hotel. However, it glows brightly when illuminated with this. I shined the ultraviolet flashlight on Howard, whose hands suddenly turned green. He looked like a character from a cheap horror movie. He raised them and stared at me, making his face light up. Al was filming every movement. And the best part, it then transfers to everything else our criminal touches. I turned the torch toward Anthea and started to lift her skirt. She resisted, but I was ready for it. I pulled her down to the floor and kneeled down with my arm around her shoulders. My ass ended up in front of her face and her feet were pointed at the couch. I ripped open her blouse and pulled up her bra. The buttons jingled in the semi-darkness. Green handprints remained on her breasts. This stuff won't go away, I said. Al, if you look at Howard's face, you'll see his mouth is green too. That's from kissing her breasts. A gift that won't stop giving, he said as he continued to shoot the video. As a result of Anthea squirming on the floor, her skirt lifted up, which I assumed it would. Her green panties became visible. I leaned forward, squeezed her hands even harder with my knees, and ignoring her squeals of pain, ripped her panties off. She managed to scream, "No!" But it was too late. "Keep her legs open!" Al jumped down and grabbed her ankles. I'm sure he would have enjoyed this sight much more if the lights had been on. No matter, he could soon. I didn't want her anymore. "Roll her over!" I lifted my knees off her and he crossed her legs and flipped her over onto her stomach. Howard's glowing handprints remained on her ass. Al grabbed his phone again and I got up and turned on the light. She just lay there, sobbing and exposing her pink body parts. Al couldn't stop looking at them and kept making a movie. Finally, Anthea struggled to her feet and sat down in a chair. "So we're clear?" I asked. "The details of the divorce I have laid out, or that evidence will be published far and wide, not least to Howard's wife." I looked at Anthea. "Are we going to do this my way? Or would you prefer the most messy divorce imaginable?" "We'll do it your way." Broughton stood up to leave and looked at Anthea. I may have additional duties for you. Don't worry, I'll wash my hands.